The top of 30 is fourths and fifths. I did more explaining of that. I'm not really going to explain. They're just bigger intervals. I'm just going to play it through so it's in the beginning as an example. If you didn't hear me talking about like counting out the intervals and like steps and skips and bigger skips, I did that last class and I did it previously with seconds and thirds. But if you have questions, if you email me, I'll make sure your question's answered. Now with Jingle Bells, last time I played all the way through and I focused a little bit more on lines 1 and 2. First line's the easiest. Line 3 is just like line 1. The easiest to put together with two hands is going to be 1 and 3. They're the same. Okay, excuse me. Here's how I'm going to approach this. First line won't be as much time because it's just much simpler. But as I work through the lines, I will generally play the right hand and play the left hand. In the case of the first line where it keeps repeating, I'm just going to tell you that. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk about tips or methods. How do you go from being able to do each hand separately to working to get them together? So here we go. This is line 1. You definitely don't want to try two hands until you can do each part separately. Here we go. If you have trouble anywhere, it's probably going to be measure 3. And this is common sense. More is happening and more is moving. So you might want to even play part of that. Do that a couple times. Whatever it is that you're struggling with, make it smaller. Do a little bit, and when that feels easier, add a little bit. Now, getting together, you're going to get left hand ready. Left hand is just, it's the harmonic fifth. You're probably going to start with one measure unless it feels easy. Then you can continue. Get both hands ready. Now, one thing that may be a little tricky if you're not aware of it is the left hand has to stay down. That's a whole note. The right hand's going to play 4 beats while the left hand holds. So they both go down and left hand is going to hold. I'll play 2 measures. Now you're going to lift both hands and down together. And unless that feels really easy, you would just keep repeating that. Don't loop it where you don't stop. Don't go. Don't just keep looping it like a cycle. Play the section and stop. Because when you stop, that's when you think about what you just did. You assess it, you notice it. And if something's hard or you maybe didn't get right, that's where you think about that. And then you want to focus again. Now, that's going to be easy. Every one of you will probably find you get that right away. Measure 3 and 4. I'm going to start there. Get both hands ready. You might need to go slower at first. If you need to pause here, go ahead. You would want to pause rather than sort of barge ahead when you're not sure and then make a mistake. Because every time you play it wrong, you're actually teaching your nervous system wrong. It's your brain that has to control everything. So you take it, small section. You'd repeat maybe 3 times, maybe 5 times. At some point, you're going to notice it doesn't feel hard as much, or it feels easier. You're going to notice that progress. Then you would put that line together. We're going to move to line 2. A lot more is happening here. The right hand can be a little bit of a challenge not because it's hard, but because there's so darn many Fs. And then there's a bunch of E's. And what happens is, from teaching this 24 years, people just, they think they're paying attention, but they don't really realize how this works. They're not paying quite enough attention. There's one other thing that can throw this off. If you know this song, if you kind of grew up with this when you were a kid, it's a little bit simplified in measure 2. The original melody I learned was, there's an uneven note in there, and there's an extra little quick little note. They leave out the quick note and they leave out the uneven. So if you know it in your head, but you're following along here, that's going to throw you off. So even if this isn't how you know it, just go for this. What we're doing now is we're focusing on how you learn something and how you start learning to read music. Now, if you already can read music, you can just go through this and you can move on your own. All right. Right hand first, I'm going to do 2 measures. So I played 4 notes and then 4 notes. I played 2 measures of 4 beats each. Now, if you find you're getting lost, I can't quite tell. I think you guys, it's so tiny, my little screen's tiny. I think you can see my hand. What I'm doing, if it's a little bit blown out, because what I see is very small and the contrast is so extreme, but I'm pretty sure what I'm doing is in line 2, with my left hand pointer finger, I am touching the F and I'm going to move forward. So basically I'm going to point for myself, not because I'm an idiot, but just to help me stay focused where I am. So I'll point to an F, play an F. Point to the next, 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 and then there's one more. Because I'm pointing, I can see now it changes to E. That's just a way of kind of making it very easy to see. If you're looking down on the piano and you're looking back, you can see exactly where you need to look. That's something you can try. Let's try 2 hands. We're going to try left hand 2 measures. Pay attention. They're different. A lot of people miss that. One more thing to pay attention to. I just noticed that people often mistake the first one. They mistake the notes. They get the 4th, but they do the wrong 4th. Your thumb's on G. Your forefinger's on D. That's going to move down. Alrighty, let's do it. Get both hands ready. You can pause when you need to change left hand. At this point, you're going to crank up your attention. Pay attention to both hands. You would do that several times just like that, real slow, pausing, and then you should find you can go a little faster. Repeat that a couple times. Then we're going to jump to the last 2 measures. The right hand, you might go slower than that. Left hand is going to go single notes. That's a 4 on D. A lot of people get mixed up. The thumb is 1. In the left hand, 1 is not C. Your pinky's on the C. Your thumb's on the G. This is going to sound terrible, but that's correct. When we fill everything in the full chord, it's going to sound great, but by itself, it's very bare bones. It sounds stark. Take your time. Check both hands. So you would work that till that's easier. Then you would put them together. When you put them together, it's probably going to feel weird in the middle. And when I make these statements, it's because I've seen this just countless times. So this is line 2, getting both hands ready. being careful. Listen to this. That's just going to sound stark and it's going to sound wrong, but that's what it is. So I'm going to stop with that. That gives you information on how you can work with that. Now, line 3 is like line 1. Line 4 starts the same. The hardest part is the end. I'm going to point out what's going on and what people sometimes have trouble with or miss. In the right hand, there's a skip. I can't tell you how many people put the skip in the wrong place, so pay attention. The fingering will help you, but you don't want to just rely on fingering. You just want to pay attention. You might circle if you're missing. A lot of people do this. They put an E in there. Don't do that. Then a skip and a step. Left hand moves twice in one measure. You might not want to start this if the first 2 lines are not easy yet. My suggestion would be work on 2 lines, get them together. Once line 2 is coming together, doesn't necessarily mean you can play it fast, but you really understand the last 2 measures, then you can work more on this, because these last 2 measures are just going to take a lot more work. I'm going to show you how you can, let's call it break down the second to last measure. Getting both hands ready. Very slow. And just do that much, or even get the skip. So you're going to want to work on that. We're going to move on because I'm so sorry, my nose itches. I have allergies and I didn't take my pill, and I just all right. So next page at the top, we've got 4ths and 5ths. They are different from the previous 4ths and 5ths. I pointed this out before. Left hand is a different 4th. It's like an echo. It's the same notes that the right hand played, but the fingers are different. Then measure 3 is a different right hand interval. And then the last one is still like new compared to the previous page. So check that out. Bottom of the page, we're going to take this not like 2 lines. We're going to do small sections. I'm going to play 2 measures. This is not, I would say, not the most challenging one. The left hand may feel a little different because of that movement, but we're going to use that movement a lot over the term. So get that worked out. Make sure you're playing the correct notes. Once that's good, the next 2 measures sounds like this. What's interesting here is each hand sounds kind of the same, except left hand is lower. But you're using different finger patterns, so just be aware of that. This one ends on 1 and 3. And 5 and 3. So they're different. But so far, we haven't gotten to the hardest part. I think the next one is. I believe that, for a beginner, is probably the hardest, because going from the right hand, the 5 and the 3, to the 5 and 4, I think that's just a little harder. Left hand is easy. Why is that? Because the left hand is working with these fingers. These are harder to use than these. Easy. Not so easy till you really work at it and get used to it over many years. And these fingers are still harder to use than I don't know why that is. It has to do with the hands and the way the tendons are. In most people, 3 and 4 are attached, and maybe even with 5. Somehow the forefinger is tethered down a little bit. Alrighty. Last 2 measures. I think this one's kind of easy. Okay, one of the things I want to show you at the end, if I can remember, is I put videos of these in a folder where I just listed titles, and I think I did the rest of the book, all the songs. So I want to show you that if I don't forget. So I'm not going to work more on that, and you really don't feel you have to work until you can go through the whole thing. That's great if you can, but I think you can prioritize your time and your energy. Jingle Bells is going to be a quiz song. I don't know quite when, because I want you to start focusing on it, and then I'm just going to check out how people are doing. So I want you to work on that, be working on that. And as far as a song like Dueling Harmonics, there's important information to be garnered here, but you're not ever going to perform this. This is just, you don't need to take this to the same standard. You need to understand it and be able to get through it. Now, we're moving on. Page 32, if you have your book, it's just the C chord in both hands. We've done left hand. Now you get to see what it looks like in notation. There's the grand staff, the top, the treble clef, and the bass clef, and the left hand. In this case, it starts with half notes, and then the right hand. We've done the right hand in C position. Now you're going to work on getting all 3 together. You might find that just like for the left hand, that might be hard at first. So just try a little bit at a time. If it's really hard, don't do it for 20 minutes. That's ridiculous. If it's really hard, do it for like 3 or 4 minutes. If it hurts your hand, just do it a minute and don't press so hard. The rest of the page is exercises, practicing it in rhythm. Then the right hand. Both hands together. And that's really incredibly basic. It's just a chord, but it's a chord with both hands. And it's a building block of something that down the road, a chord like this, and then many other chords, many patterns, can be used as the foundation of something more interesting, like that's an arpeggio. That's a broken chord. It's a building block of music. So go through that, get used to both hands. As we move into the next page, we're going to have some very simple little songs, reading both hands together, but still simple, but we're going to have that C chord in both hands. So we have more pink boxes. Top talks about reading by pattern. I talked about that last class a little bit, about reading notes by not saying C, D, E, C, but C, up a step, down a skip. You can try that. It talked about it on a previous page. I'm going to play through the song. It goes back to individual notes. If you're raising your right hand higher for comfort, the ending's going to sound weird. I'm going to play the second line. The reason that sounds really odd, one reason is because you probably have heard it the other way, but also the skip is so large. Usually melodies don't have such a large skip. Now, if you're keeping your hand higher for comfort, there's two ways you can bypass that. You can keep your right hand up without having it sound odd. So I'm going to do line 2. I'm going to bring my left hand up an octave. That makes that gap so much smaller. It's a compound interval. It's a fourth plus an octave. It's just a big skip. How do you work on this, and what's this pink box about? Reading by pattern. What's the pattern? That's a pattern. Even if you don't see it on the page, it's a pattern. If you hear it and hear it again, like if you hear this, most people, they might need to hear it more than once, but they can pick up it's the same thing. Now, this is not the page, but I'm going to play the pattern a little different. That's a pattern too. It's repeated on a different note. It went up by step and up by step. I could go up by skip. You probably can hear, and if you're not sure, over time when your ear kind of focuses more on patterns, you'll notice that. Noticing a pattern really can help you learn. So the first pattern repeats. So first of all, that makes it a reading, like a bonus, like a little bit easier. It also makes it a little bit easier learning. We don't have to memorize songs for this class. You may find that from learning, you memorize. What that means is to kind of know by heart, to know without the music. In music for performances, especially piano, the music is usually played, the music is played without music. The music is performed without sheet music. You don't have to do that, but people often find that just through repetition they do. Patterns help make that happen more quickly, especially if you notice them. If we look at measure 3, that's not the same as what we did, but guess what? It repeats. Noticing patterns can just help you learn things a lot more quickly. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Don't think you have to memorize them and notice them. It's not going to affect you as far as your grade. And, everyone learns differently. But if you notice that, that's probably going to help you. Now, line 2. And guess what? That repeats. However, I'm going to point out that in my classes, most people usually know the song. This is way simplified. This is usually... which is cooler. A little more challenging. The reason they don't do that is because it uses faster notes that we haven't learned yet. They're called eighth notes. It also uses a different hand position. It uses, because we run out of notes at G with this position, and we need the A, and we haven't got that far yet. That's why it does it. And what I find is some people get to this measure and they want to go, because they know it goes faster. So just be aware of that. This is just like Jingle Bells was simplified. This is too. I'm going to just play through that last line slowly once. I'll do it in the middle position. Notice I'm holding my left hand. That's 4 beats. Now the left hand rests and then the right hand rests. Underneath in pink text, they show a half rest. It looks very much like a whole rest. It sits on line 3 as a rule. For us, it always will. In music for choir, where there's 2 singers on one line, it could be a little different. In advanced piano music, there are times when it might be different. It'll always be that way in this class because each line has one hand, and each hand is not playing multiple parts. And that might not make sense right now. If you had done that, you'd know what I'm talking about. I don't think there's a way I can give an example that will really explain any further. Just for now, that's the way it is. Half rest sits on the third line. Whole rest hang from the fourth line. And there is another difference. As long as the notation is printed properly, if we compare them side by side, a half rest is a little fatter. From going from bottom to up, it just goes a little higher than a whole rest, and a whole rest is wider. Don't know who did that, but that's what it is. So you're going to be fine with that song. Give it a try, and we're going to move on to the next one. Here's a happy song. I think this was kind of made up for the lesson book to sort of model Whistle While You Work. A Disney song just from ages ago. It always sounds like that to me, and they call it Here's a Happy Song, and the other is called Whistle While You Work. So I think this was modeled on that to a certain extent to avoid copyright. Okay, let's look at what's going on. Melody, or the tune, it's the same thing, is in the left hand. So you're going to probably start with that. Here's first line. 2 beats. Four beats. You're going to hold those longer notes and play with the right hand while you hold. Hold this note. I'm not sure if through the interwebs, if you can hear that. I play a note and add to it. If I lifted it, it would be... It's not quite as full of a sound. It's more choppy. Okay, I'm stopping there because I wanted to show you a little bit going on. This may give you some trouble at first, so just practice 2 measures. Play that note, pause, and hold it. Keep them both down and just pause. Do that a couple times. Once you've got that, you're trying to build a little bit of a muscle memory to make it easier to add on more. You can go slow and go on a little bit. You might continue a lot or just a couple notes. Once you can do that, excuse me, you can add these. You're going to play the F. If I lifted, it would be more choppy. We're going to jump to the last line. I'm sorry. Gotta get it. left hand and adding that. I think you will find that easier once you get the first line worked out. Okay, I'm watching our time. I am going to do a little bit more, and then I'm going to come back and hopefully remember my experiment. On the next page, in the left hand, we're going to learn a variation of the G chord. The top and bottom notes will be the same. The middle note will be different. Some of you might find this easier to play. Instead of G, the 2 is going to play on F. This is a different kind of chord. The reason I like to start with the G chord, it's twofold. We're going to do a chord in the same position. The B's on the bottom. That's what we mean by position here. But it's a chord like the C chord and like the F chord. It's a basic chord. This is a 7th chord. It's actually built on a 4-note chord. In this book, you don't get that. But I'm just going to show you a little bit how we get that. I'm going to go to root position. We're not doing this chord in root position. But if we were, our pinky would be on G. And it would be like the C chord, but up on G. That's not a G7. That's 1, 3, 5. I'm referring to note numbers based on the root. G's the root. We need a 7. This is 5. 6, 7. This is a more complex chord. And it happens to serve a special function in the key of C. It's the dominant 7th. It tends to go back to the 1 key or the home key. Especially in classical music. There's some music that's more modern where the old, let's just call them standardized habits, whatever they were, don't always hold because modern music is more complex. But this usually went there. The 5-7 goes home to the home key, whatever key it's in. So we're learning that in this book, and it's different. They give you charts in the book. I can't see pink at all. I see a white blob. But I'm looking at the middle to bottom of the page. There's your C major with G7. My thumb is going to play the 2 finger right next to the note. 2 notes together. I don't know if you see better. B, F, G. The book gives a chart. I sent in the beginning of the year or the term, there's a home page where I uploaded a lot of things that could be helpful. Some were necessary, others were extra. I copied some of them into, where'd I copy them? I think I copied them into this week. I didn't open up last week, the week 4, and there was a reason for that. I had been waiting to hear back from support about copying things from a previous term because I couldn't find it. There's not really much there because we kind of went through it. Everything you need, we did, but I added a little bit. And then in week 5, I put some things that would be useful. So on this page 34, the focus is on 2 chords, C that you know, G7. It's a variation of what you know. At the top of the page is a cool exercise. In the beginning, I did this. C chord. That is just taking these 2 chords and arpeggiating them. In this book, they call it a broken chord. F chord, etc. Once you know a few chords and some patterns, you can actually make some interesting music in themselves, they're not melodic, but they can be used with melodies to make music. If you're doing production and you're making tracks, you can use chords broken up into different patterns, whether it's rhythmic patterns, like anyone that's played. That's just a pattern. It's a chord that moves in a progression and it's broken up into a pattern. Okay, I'm almost done. I'm actually going to point out something at the very top of the next page, and then I'm going to stop the book. So you've got the B for the left hand. They're introducing that. There's graphics. Top of the next page, 35, introducing tied notes. A tie is a curved line. It goes from one note to another note. You're going to hold them down. You're not going to play them again. If you've got your book, look at the first two measures of 35. In the left hand, I don't repeat the chord. Each note is tied. Why does this exist? Why don't they just make a different kind of a note for more beats? Because in a 4/4 measure, no note can have more than 4 beats. If we need longer notes, we tie together the notes we have. The whole line. And guess what? We did that in the very beginning. We're not going to work on that today.